Hi everyone. Before we start this webinar, I'll just give 1 to 2 more minutes for everyone to show up, and then as soon as the time's up, we'll start with the webinar. Jennifer, can you confirm that my screen is showing properly?
Great.
Awesome. All right, let's get started. Hello everyone. My name is Hideyuki Terashima, and I am an employee at the Illinois State Water Survey, which is located at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. This is the third webinar of our 3-part free compliance resource webinar series. And today I will be providing an overview of monitoring and reporting compliance requirements for drinking water treatment operators, while featuring at the same time resources that are publicly available to help operators to understand monitoring and reporting requirements. I will also talk about...
I want to stop you for a second. Your audio is a little garbled. I don't know if you need to adjust your microphone or location. It was better before we got started.
Sure, let me try to fix that. Is that any better?
It seems fine for now.
Okay.
Katie says mine is not so good either, so it could be a connection issue. I apologize, folks. We'll continue as best we can.
Right. Let me know if the problem comes up again, and I'll pause and we'll see how it goes from there. Okay. So as I was saying, I'll be providing an overview of monitoring and applying compliance requirements for drinking water treatment operators, while featuring resources that are publicly available to help operators to understand monitoring and reporting requirements. I will also talk about wateroperator.org, which is a website that we developed here at the U of I to serve as a clearinghouse for publicly available resources for water and wastewater operators. Before we get started, I would like to go over some housekeeping for this webinar. This webinar will be recorded and it is scheduled to go for an hour and a half. The recording of the webinar will be uploaded to our wateroperator.org YouTube channel once the webinar is over. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please use the GoToWebinar interface to ask the question. If you look at the GoToWebinar tool, you should see a questions section where you will see a text box where you can type and send us a question. We'll review these questions at the end of the webinar. For this webinar, we did not seek approval for credits to provide training credits, but we will provide a certification of completion after the webinar is over upon request, which operators can use to try to get credits from their state agency. You can email us at info@wateroperator.org email address to request for a certificate. So this is today's outline of the webinar. I'll begin with a brief introduction of the wateroperator.org website. Then for the majority of the webinar, I'll talk about the Safe Drinking Water Act, the monitoring and reporting requirements under the Safe Drinking Water Act, and resources which are publicly available to help water systems comply with those requirements. After that, I will demonstrate how to use the wateropera.org website to find some of these resources, as well as what other resources are available out there. Then we'll finish off with reviewing the questions which were sent to us. So what is wateropera.org? It is a website which we developed here at the U of I in collaboration with the Rural Community Assistance Partnership, RCAP, with funding from the US EPA. It serves as a clearinghouse of publicly available resources to help small water and wastewater system operators. The website is accessible to everyone, and there is no fee or registration to use. So if you are interested throughout the webinar, go ahead and check out our website out, and try to play around with it. Try to search some of those resources while I'm going through the webinar, and it could be helpful. The two most notable features on our website is our nationwide calendar and our resource library. We have a database of over 800 organizations that we manage. These are national organizations, state agencies, and even small regional organizations. We have staff that visits each of these organizations' website and collect information on events like operator trainings, webinars, conferences. Pretty much any event that offers continuing education credits for operators, we'll find that information and list it on our calendar. So this calendar is meant to help operators save time from having to search through numerous organizations' websites and find all the relevant events on a single calendar. To give you an idea of how much data we collect, we enter about 10,000 events to this calendar annually. Similarly, the second feature is our resource library. Just like our calendar, our staff goes through the 800 organizations website to collect publicly available resources that are useful, such as fact sheets, reports, manuals, presentations, on our library, so that operators can save time searching through Google search results, which may not always provide what they're looking for, and find all the information on our library. We currently have over 15,000 documents in our resource library database, and it's always growing. We always make sure to link to the host organization and credit them, and I'll be demonstrating how to use these tools towards the end of the webinar. So this webinar series is supposed to highlight some of the resources which we have added to our library in the past and help attendees learn about new resources which they might not know about, while focusing on compliance issues. So today's topic will be on monitoring and reporting compliance. Before I begin, I do have two caveats that I would like to mention. We will be sharing resources from US EPA and individual states. Some states may have more stringent requirements than the federal regulation, so these resources will be shared as examples that are helpful to better understand the requirements and examples for state programs who may be interested in improving their own materials to make them more effective. We are also not regulatory experts. We can help you find resources that you didn't know existed and connect you with individuals who can help you. So questions about specific regulatory requirements are best addressed to your primacy agency. And while I'm going through the webinar, I'll definitely be mentioning that from time to time. If you don't know who to contact, that's something that we can also help you with. So before we get into the specific of monitoring and reporting compliance, let's first discuss the Safe Drinking Water Act. This is a federal law which was passed in 1974, which was later amended in 1986 and 1996 to protect public health by regulating the drinking water supply. The act authorizes the US EPA to set national health-based standards for drinking water to protect against naturally occurring and man-made contaminants that are present in water. Every public water system is required to follow these standards. So these standards are listed under the National Primary Drinking Water Regulation, which provides a list of regulated contaminants, their maximum contaminant levels, which are the highest level a contaminant that is allowed in the water, a maximum contaminant level goal, which are non-enforced health goals that provide adequate safety that water systems should try to aim for, and treatment techniques, which are required processes to reduce the level of contaminants in the public water supply. Water systems are required to monitor for these contaminants in their water and notify their customers if any of these violations were violated, or sorry, if any of these standards were violated. And I'll definitely mention the list of those contaminants once more throughout this webinar. So the 1996 amendment specifically added provisions to enhance the level of protection by providing assistance to small systems so that they have the ability to comply with the standards. It also implemented standards for the certification and recertification of drinking water operators to ensure systems are operating safely. It also requires states to conduct source water assessments to identify risks of contamination to protect the source water supply. It also introduced drinking water state revolving fund to help systems make infrastructure or management improvements. It also emphasized that consumers have the right to know about their drinking water, and it encouraged water systems to engage with their public. So as part of the public information requirements, community water systems are required to develop and distribute consumer confidence reports, which are annual reports about the water consumers drink. It usually includes information on where their water comes from, what contaminants were detected, violations, if any, were incurred from the public water system, what did the water system do to fix those issues. EPA also requires water systems to produce compliance reports, or the SDWA also requires EPA to produce a National Public Water Systems Compliance Report, which is a public available annual report that summarizes public water system violations which were reported by the state privacy agency. So it's all those violations that were sent to the state, which were sent to EPA and consolidated into a single report. And as I mentioned earlier, this is the National Primary Drinking Water Regulations. It is a 7-page fact sheet, which is developed by the US EPA, and it includes a list of 87 regulated contaminants. It includes information on the maximum contaminant level, potential health effects from each of these contaminants, where usually the contaminants come from, so the sources, and then the treatment technique requirements if they are applicable to each contaminant. This is definitely a handy fact sheet that operators can definitely print out, keep around with them, just so they know that what these are the contaminants that they have to be monitoring for, and understand that these are the requirements of each individual contaminant. So these contaminants can be grouped into 6 different groups. Microorganisms, which include contaminants such as E. coli, disinfectants, that includes chlorine, disinfection byproducts, that includes haloacetic acids and total trihalomethanes, inorganic chemicals, which include arsenic, lead, copper, and then organic chemicals such as atrazine and radionuclides like uranium. Public water systems are required to monitor for these contaminants, with monitoring frequencies which can vary vastly between each contaminant. These monitoring requirements are listed under individual rules which regulate each contaminant group. Under the Safe Drinking Water Act, states are also able to implement more stringent requirements for individual contaminants, as well as require monitoring for additional contaminants. So operators should always be aware of these contaminants if they are present in their water supply, and they should definitely know the federal and state specific standards. So what happens when public water system fails to comply with the Safe Drinking Water Act? Well, depending on what specifically the water system didn't comply with, certain violations are issued. The first is a health-based violation, which occurs when water quality results show certain contaminants exceeded maximum contaminant level, which is the highest allowable limit for contaminant concentrations, or maximum residual disinfectant levels exceeded, which are the highest allowable concentration of disinfectants allowed. And if a system violates treatment technique requirements, which specify that specific treatment process are required to reduce the levels of certain contaminants. Next is a monitoring and reporting violation, which occurs when systems fail to conduct the required monitoring for drinking water quality, monitor for specific contaminants, or fails to report the results to their state privacy agency, or EPA. A public notice violation occurs when systems fail to notify their customers if there's a serious problem with their water that could potentially be a risk to public health, or if there are other violations which water systems are required to publicly notify. Other violations include violations with the Safe Drinking Water Act requirements, such as failing to issue a consumer confidence report or failing to maintain specific records. Once these violations are issued, water systems will be required to take corrective action to resolve the problem that caused the violation. So every year, state primacy agencies are required to develop an annual compliance report, which address the violations of the National Primary Drinking Water Regulations from public water systems from their state. And they have to submit that report to EPA. These reports are publicly available and can usually be found on each state agency's website. EPA is then required to compile the data received from each state and develop the National Public Water System Compliance Report, which provides a summary of public water system violations for that year. EPA then provides a summary of how the nation's public water system can improve compliance. EPA currently has a record of these reports from 1996 to 2013. For data from 2013 and beyond, the public can find summarized national statistics on public water systems and individual violations, as well as how they were enforced through EPA's Enforcement and Compliance History Online Drinking Water Dashboard. Sorry, that was long. The dashboard, which is located on EPA's website, displays annual compliance data in an interactive format, so users can find information on annual compliance data, as well as information on specific water systems to learn whether those systems were reported, if they were inspected, what violations did that system have, what did they report, and whether they fixed those issues and returned to compliance. Here's what the dashboard looks like, along with the link on the bottom to access the dashboard. As you can see from the screenshot, you will first find 6 panels, which shows data on the number of public water systems by type for a given year, a number of public water systems which had site visits, so sanitary surveys, how many violations were reported during that year, a number of serious violations or violators, a number of enforcement actions taken against public water systems, and how many systems returned to compliance. Some of these panels have additional drop-downs to refine your search. So for example, for the public water systems with any violations, you can search for specific violations like monitoring reporting violations, health-based violations. Then once you populate the graph or the bar graph or a pie chart, you can click on each of those graphs, which will pull up a immense list of systems which applies to the, for example, violations that were incurred. And from that list, there is also a link that you can click to find the report, which provides facility information along with compliance monitoring history and violation history. This dashboard is meant to improve transparency by making water system compliance information available and accessible to the public, but it also gives you a better idea of the statistics on how whether violations are going down throughout the year, how many systems are maintaining compliance, is it improving throughout the past few years, information like that. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you can use the drop-down menu to refine your search. For violations, there are health-based violations, public notification violations, and monitoring reporting violations. By refining the data for each violation type, I was able to get a better understanding of what kind of violations were reported the most by public water systems. And here are some numbers that I was able to get for the fiscal year of 2019. You can change the data depending on calendar year and fiscal year, but I chose fiscal year since that was the main data that I was able to download and use for data analysis. So for the fiscal year of 2019, there were close to 147,000 active public water systems, and out of those, 46,000 systems had at least one violation for 2019. Now, out of those systems, close to 37,000 systems reported monitoring and reporting violations for the fiscal year of 2019. while 21,000 systems reported monitoring reporting violations since the beginning of the year 2019. I made this distinction between fiscal year and beginning year because the overall data from the fiscal year 2019 included violations from past years, which I believe hasn't been resolved yet. So to refine the data more and make data analysis easier, I chose the violation data which were reported since 2019. And with that, there were 62,000 monitoring and reporting violations which were reported since 2019. I also looked at violations related to public notification and found that close to 7,000 systems reported public notification or other violations since 2019. And from those systems, there are close to 9,000 public notification violations and 3,000 consumer confidence report related violation. For each monitoring and reporting violation, I looked closer at which drinking water rule each violation was associated with to analyze the number of violations per drinking water rule. And when I sorted the data, this is what I was able to come up with. This pie chart shows the percentage of monitoring and reporting violations based on each rule. So as you can see, the majority of these violations were associated with the revised total coliform rule. Followed by the chemical contaminants rule, which manages SOCs, which are synthetic organic chemicals, VOCs, which are volatile organic chemicals, and the next were the lead and copper rule, followed by groundwater rule, stage 1 and 2 disinfection and disinfection, or disinfectants and disinfection byproducts rule, a source water treatment rule, nitrates, and the other rules which are listed in the smaller pie chart. So now that we have a better understanding of where these monitoring and reporting violations are coming from, I'll go over each of these rules with a focus on the ones that had more violations, discuss what specific monitoring and reporting violations were reported from for each rule, and showcase some resources that are available to help systems maintain compliance with those rules. So the first regulation we will look at is the Revised Total Coliform Rule, RTCR. This rule, which took effect in April of 2016, was intended to replace existing 1989 Total Coliform Rule. This rule requires water systems to monitor for total coliforms and E. coli in their water system. The presence of total coliforms and E. coli in the water system suggests that there's some sort of failure somewhere in the distribution systems or treatment system, which can mean that there is a pathway for pathogens or other contaminants to enter the water system. This rule is designed to improve the protection of public health by using, the presence of total coliforms and E. coli as a trigger to assess and correct the failure of the system, and notify the state and public about the contaminant issue and why the system had these deficiencies. The RTCR sets a maximum contaminant level goal and maximum contaminant level for E. coli, and treatment technique requirements for total coliforms. On the slide is a screenshot of EPA's RTCR Quick Reference Guide, which provides information on compliance requirements, monitoring requirements, and how the rule has changed since the total coliform rule. These are more details on the requirements under the RTCR. All public water systems are required to have a sample siting plan, which indicates the location and schedule that water systems should follow to collect routine and repeat coliform samples. Newer samples are required to have a sample siting plan or similar monitoring plan, which is approved by your state agency. And public water systems are required to collect samples from these sites and follow the schedule. Seasonal systems such as non-community water systems that don't operate year-round are required to conduct a state-approved startup procedure and report that to the state that they've completed this startup procedure. If routine samples return total coliform positive or E. coli positive, systems are required to collect repeat samples and conduct a level 1 or 2 assessment if necessary to find sanitary deficiencies and correct them. And finally, there are also public notification requirements which have to be met depending on the violations incurred by the water system. So let's talk about these violations. These are the different types of violations which can incur under the RTCR. Again, I apologize for the very wordy slide, but I needed to fit all this information in a single slide. So there are 4 different violations: monitoring violation, MCO violations, reporting violations, and treatment technique violation. A monitoring violation occurs if a system fails to collect routine samples or fails to analyze for E. coli when a routine sample is total chloroform positive. MCL violation occurs if a system fails to collect repeat samples after an E. coli positive sample, or if a system fails to test for E. coli after total chloroform positive samples, or if a repeat sample tests E. coli positive after a total chloroform sample. Reporting violations occur when a system fails to submit a monitoring report or a completely assessment from the state. If a system fails to notify the state of an E. coli positive sample, or if seasonal systems fails to submit a completed seasonal startup certification. Treatment technique violations occur when systems fail to conduct a level 1 or 2 assessment, if a system fails to correct all the sanitary defects which were detected within a specified time frame, or seasonal systems fail to complete a state-approved startup procedure. On the right are the statistics from the 2019 violation data. There were 24,000 RTCR-related monitoring reporting violations, with the majority resulting from failing to conduct routine monitoring, followed by failing to report sample results. So let's look at some resources to help water systems to better understand the monitoring and reporting requirements so they can maintain compliance. Each water system has a minimum number of samples which they are required to collect routinely. The number of samples collected will depend on the size of the population as well as the water source type. Ohio EPA has a handy one-page fact sheet which has a table to help systems determine their routine monitoring requirements. So what happens if a routine sample tests positive for total coliform? Water systems will be required to collect 3 additional repeat samples for each total coliform positive routine sample within 24 hours. The locations of the repeat samples should be located on your sample siting plan, but one is from the original location, one location has to be within 5 connections downstream, and one within 5 connections upstream. Ohio EPA also has fact sheets, each for seasonal systems, small systems serving less than 10,000, and systems serving greater than 10,000, which covers the routine and repeat monitoring requirements. So these fact sheet listed on the right are an example that I have on the right is an example for small community systems. It includes information on key monitoring requirements, repeat sampling requirements, and when a level 1 or 2 assessment is triggered depending on the sample results. So it's definitely important to be aware of these requirements. Various states have their own tables such as this or fact sheets, so it is recommended for you to check your state primacy agency's website because they may have their own version that you can follow along with contact information to the state agency. The US EPA also has a 6-page document which includes 6 placards, which provides routine and repeat sampling requirements for systems serving under 10 or 1,000, so for small systems. These placards are customizable by individuals to include crucial information like laboratory and state contacts, where your routine and repeat sample locations are, how many number of samples are required, and along with other information that could be useful. 3 placards are applicable to non-seasonal systems collecting routine samples monthly, quarterly, or annually. 2 are for seasonal water systems collecting routine samples monthly or quarterly, and 1 is for when public water systems trigger a level 1 or 2 assessment. These can help operators react immediately to total chloroform positive or E. coli positive water samples and quickly take appropriate actions as long as you have these printed out, have them somewhere visible within your treatment system. Vermont DEC also has a handy 4-page fact sheet, which includes the routine and repeat sampling requirements represented in very compact form. They call it the pocket sampling guide, so that they can be easily carried around. The sampling guide also includes instructions when there is a positive E. coli positive routine sample, as well as monitoring requirements under the RTCR. Indiana Department of Environmental Management also has short fact sheets serving as reference guides for monitoring requirements. These fact sheets are again designed for smaller systems, but the information provided can be applicable to larger systems. So these fact sheet provides concise information on the steps water systems should take, when what the water systems are required to comply with the RTCR, and also includes an easy to read table to help systems figure out, depending on the results of their routine and repeat samples, if there was a MCL violation, if there wasn't, and what actions that public water systems are required to take. Several state agencies also have developed flowcharts such as these to help guide water systems on the proper responses to routine and repeat sampling results. Here are two flowcharts, one from Michigan Department of Environmental, Great Lakes and Energy, or EGLE, and one from New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. Depending on the results of your routine sample, the flowchart will help you guide water systems with the proper compliance procedures. New Jersey has flowcharts specifically for systems on monthly and quarterly monitoring schedules. They also have a flowchart for triggered source water monitoring, which applies to groundwater systems to comply with the groundwater rule. So now that we've established monitoring requirements, let's discuss what the sampling site plan is. So under the RTCR, water systems are required to develop or update a sample siting plan, which specifies where routine and repeat samples will be taken from, sampling schedules, information on water systems, and ideally a map of the distribution system. The reason these plans are necessary is to ensure that all sampling is done correctly, even when there is personnel change. The details of the plan may vary from state to state, and most states will generally have their own template which can be used to fill out sample site information. So I would definitely check with your state agency, see if they have their own template, because it will also include contact information or where to submit your sample siting plan to be reviewed. US EPA also has a template which for smaller systems, so systems serving less than 1,000. This 11-page manual provides instructions and considerations for selecting proper sample sites, and provides examples of distribution system structures, and provides detailed information on these are the best possible locations to collect total coliform samples. For state-specific resources, some states that come to my mind are like a New Jersey DP. They have a guidance manual for developing a coliform sample setting plan, and they also have a sample plan checklist, which helps water system make sure their sample setting plan has all the information they need to be approved. Vermont DEC also has a RTCR webpage where they have a video where they have staff that demonstrates how to complete a sample setting plan step by step, along with few examples of completed plans, which utilities can use as a reference when they have to build their own. Water systems should be aware of their existing sample siting plan if they have one, and make sure to follow those instructions to maintain compliance with monitoring requirements. If systems do need help with developing their site plan or help finding laboratories to test their samples, go ahead and definitely contact your state agency for assistance. And finally, let's go over the public notification requirements under the RTCR. There are 3 tiers of violations which require water systems to notify their customers. Tier 1 violation requires immediate notice, usually within 24 hours, and this is triggered when an E. coli positive MCL violation occurs. Tier 2 violation requires notice within 30 days and is triggered when a system fails to conduct a level 1 or 2 assessment, or fails to correct all sanitary defects within 30 days. A Tier 3 violation requires an annual notice, and these would be monitoring reporting violations. US EPA has a 38-page document or manual where they list instructions for issuing a public notice related to RTCR, as well as various templates which can be used for the notice. Public notification documents are also another document which many state agencies may have their own templates for, and operators can either use the EPA one to develop their own, or definitely use the state issued public notice template. The next rule I'll be going over is the groundwater rule. This rule, which was implemented in 2006, applies to any public water system or consecutive system that uses groundwater as their source. This rule was developed to increase the protection against fecal contamination for public water systems that use groundwater systems or groundwater sources, and reduce the risk of illness caused by these microbial contamination. The rule was established using a risk-based strategy to find groundwater systems which are susceptible to fecal contamination and require susceptible systems to take corrective actions to fix those deficiencies before the public water supply is contaminated. These risk-based strategies include routine sanitary surveys of systems to identify deficiencies, corrective actions for systems with significant deficiency or source water fecal contamination, compliance monitoring requirements, and triggered source water monitoring requirements. EPA has several short fact sheets, such as the quick reference guide showing on the right, along with a general requirements fact sheet that covers sanitary surveys, monitoring requirements, public notification requirements, which provides more details on each of those individual requirements for pertaining to the groundwater rule. And you can find information on how to comply with each component of that rule within those fact sheets. You can find these fact sheets by accessing the URL at the top of the link, where you can find, it'll send you to the EPA webpage on groundwater rule. You can find all those compliance fact sheets. But I'll be going over some of those in the next few slides. So let's take a closer look at the monitoring requirements under the groundwater rule. There are two types of monitoring which are required under the groundwater rule: compliance monitoring or source water monitoring. Compliance monitoring is required by systems that provide at least 4 log treatment of viruses, so 99.9% removable. This can be continuous monitoring or daily samples taken to demonstrate that the treatment processes are effective and that residual disinfection levels are meeting the state minimums. Depending whether it's continuous monitoring or single samples will depend on your system size, and you can find that information on the monitoring requirements groundwater fact sheet listed on the right side. For source water monitoring, there are two types: trigger source water monitoring and assessment source water monitoring. Triggered source water monitoring occurs when systems are notified that a routine total coliform sample collected under the RICR returns positive. Water systems will then be required to collect another additional source water sample within 24 hours, have it tested, and if that source sample tested positive for total coliforms, systems either have to take corrective action or take 5 additional samples and have them tested, which when they return, again, total coliform positive, corrective actions will be taken to increase source water protection. There's also assessment source water monitoring, which states can require groundwater systems to conduct if they believe that a groundwater system is specifically susceptible to fecal contamination. So, for example, if there's a septic system in the vicinity of the source, they might be required to do assessment source water monitoring. So states might also require this monitoring when systems begin to use a new source. So these requirements can be, again, found on the monitoring requirements fact sheet. EPA also has 5 fact sheets which provides monitoring and reporting requirements under the groundwater rule. These placards can be customized to include laboratory contact information, state primacy contacts, and can be printed to remain somewhere that is visible at your treatment facility. Again, these will guide you through what happens if your routine sample tested positive, what to do, what actions compliance monitoring or triggered source water monitoring they'll be required to do, and who to contact and notify depending on the sample results. Now, if a system fails to conduct any of the required monitoring requirements, a violation occurs. The annual violation data from 2019 show that there were close to 4,000 monitoring and reporting violations associated with the groundwater rule. 44% of these were failing to conduct triggered source water monitoring. 36% were associated with failing to conduct or report compliance monitoring, and 20% were failing to conduct source water or assessment source water monitoring. These violations, along with events when source water samples test fecal indicator positive, requires the systems to notify the public. This public notification fact sheet listed on the right will go more in detail and in depth of each scenario that requires public notification and information that needs to be included in the public notice, as well as the consumer confidence reports. So, since the majority of these violations are failing to conduct source water monitoring, water systems should be, again, aware of the monitoring requirements, be aware of your monitoring schedule, make sure the proper samples are collected when necessary. The next rule that I'll cover is the chemical contaminants rule, which is also called the Phase 2.5 rules, which regulates over 65 contaminants in 3 contaminants groups. These groups are synthetic organic contaminants, which are man-made contaminants commonly found in herbicide runoffs or industrial discharges, volatile organic contaminants, VOCs, which are a group of chemical compounds commonly found in many household products. These can also enter groundwater through industrial discharges or improper wastewater treatment. And inorganic contaminants are IOCs, which are naturally occurring or man-made elements or compounds which are not carbon-based. These can include arsenic, nitrates, lead and copper, etc. So every public water system is required to monitor for these contaminants. Water system type, size, and source type will determine the monitoring frequency for each contaminant. Some states can also require monitoring of additional contaminants or have stricter monitoring requirements. For example, for arsenic, I believe New Hampshire and New Jersey have stricter restrictions. Various states have additional contaminants within the synthetic organic contaminants that, or VOCs that they are required to monitor for. So here are the monitoring reporting violation statistics from 2019. There are 21,000 violations total for SOCs, VOCs, and IOCs, and 99.9% of these violations were attributed to the failure to collect routine samples or to report analytical reports to the state. There are also very few violations for monitoring reporting of check, repeat, or confirmation samples. These samples are necessary for certain contaminants like arsenic and nitrates as part of their additional monitoring requirements. Now, along with these violations, there is also an MCL violation, which occurs for SOC, VOC, and IOC when the running annual average of quarterly samples is greater than the MCL, or for nitrates, it's different where MCL exceedance occurs when the average of the routine and confirmation sample that they're required to collect is greater than the MCL. EPA has this standardized monitoring framework quick reference guide, which is a 3-page fact sheet, which provides the monitoring requirements for these individual contaminant groups, along with asbestos, nitrite, and radionuclides. At first, it might be hard to read, but it's actually not that hard. Each row is separated by the contaminant group, and within those rows, it's further separated depending on the source water type or the number of customers served. Then you can determine which row that you should be looking for depending on the whether you have reduced monitoring, if you have a waiver, reduced monitoring waiver or not. Then from that, you can find for each year or each quarter, each several years, how many samples are required depending on the number of stars listed in each cell. Again, individual states may have more requirements, so water systems should contact their state to make sure that this is the right schedule to follow. Each state might have individual waivers or reduced monitoring requirements as well, which you have to be, or which water systems have to be aware of to make sure to avoid monitoring reporting violations where they either forget to collect samples or forget to report their sample results. This is another fact sheet from EPA that's specifically on nitrate monitoring requirements. It's a one-page printable poster or fact sheet, and it's intended to help operators understand what the routine monitoring requirements are, what systems should do depending on the results of their routine samples, and how systems can achieve reduced monitoring, as well as how to determine if a MCO violation occurs. Since again, the way nitrate MCO exceedance is different from the rest of the chemical contaminants within this rule. Again, this is something that you can print out, have somewhere in your treatment facility if you're aware that you have nitrate problems. There's a place to put contact information with your primacy agency as well. So if an exceedance happens, you know who to contact. Arsenic is another contaminant within the chemical contaminants rule, but it also has its own arsenic rule, which requires additional monitoring beyond compliance with the chemical contaminants rule. So similar to nitrates, if the arsenic concentration in any sample exceeds the MCL, water systems may be required to collect a confirmation sample. And if the average of the confirmation sample and routine sample exceeds the MCL, systems will be required to increase their monitoring frequency and report to the public of this happening. US EPA has a 58-page guidance manual for smaller systems that cover the monitoring requirements, how to determine compliance, reporting and public notification requirements. And it also includes a arsenic monitoring worksheet, which operators can use to keep track of sample results, and it'll guide you to the process of determining whether there was a violation or not. So it's a handy worksheet to keep in hand to monitor, maintain, and monitor your results. EPA also has a one-page fact sheet that has a 12-step guide for water systems to maintain with arsenic compliance. And each step references additional EPA resources to supplement each steps. So if you're a larger systems that where the small system guidance manual doesn't apply to, this this fact sheet can help you find additional resources. So the next resource will provide compliance information for all the contaminant groups regulated under the chemical contaminants rule. This is a 19-slide presentation from EPA Region 8, where it provides an overview of the chemical contaminants rule. It provides information on the chemical monitoring requirements, information and guidance on best places to collect samples, how to determine if increased monitoring is required or triggered, how to return to reduced monitoring, how to determine if a system is in compliance, and a few slides on best sampling practices. So the sample you collect is following the state or EPA required sampling procedure. Kansas Department of Health and Environment also has a guidance manual titled The Survival Guide for the Phase 2 and 5 Rules. This 25-page reference guide provides excellent information on the federal requirements of the chemical contaminants rule, compliance monitoring requirements, how to determine if a system is in violation, as well as required actions for each violation in a very concise and easy to navigate format. So this is definitely a great guidance manual to keep in hand to understand the requirements for each contaminant group. Now, if a system fails to monitor for a contaminant or has an MCO exceedance, public notification is required. For most IOCs, VOCs, and SOCs, a monitoring violation requires a Tier 3 public notice to be distributed within a year, and a MCO exceedance will require a Tier 2 public notice within 30 days. Nitrate specifically has a stricter requirement where monitoring violation requires a Tier 2 notice within 30 days, and nitrate MCO violation requires a Tier 1 notice within 24 hours. Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, TCEQ, has a great list of public notice templates for majority of the contaminants listed in the chemical contaminants rule. These are each individual templates for each contaminant. Utilities can use these templates and customize them to accommodate their utility or their state. TCEQ also has templates for boil odor notices, other microbial violations, and other regulations that are outside of the chemical contaminants rule. So it's a very extensive list of templates that you can use to develop your own template or use yourself and understand what the requirements are for what should be in your public notification notice. I also found several short EPA fact sheets intended to help water systems better communicate with their customers on the contaminants that are in their drinking water. There are various benefits of providing customers with information on contaminants. Customers should be aware about what is in their water, and that there is no immediate threat to consuming contaminants below the MCL, but should be aware that there is a risk of exposure to contaminants above MCLs. These communications can help build public trust, develop a closer tie with your community, and potentially help gain support for future improvement plans. So these fact sheets from EPA will help provide information on the benefits of public communication, what information customers want to know, and best practices for effective communication. Oregon Health Authority and Minnesota Department of Health also have these very short fact sheets on individual contaminants found in drinking water. These fact sheets are less technical fact sheets and are geared more towards educating the public and providing information on where these contaminants come from, the health risks of consuming these individual contaminants, guidance values for those contaminants, what customers can use their water for, even if the contaminants are present, and how these contaminants can be removed. So many households might think if they just boil the water, their contaminants will go away, but for some contaminants, boiling your water can make the situation even worse. So all that information is listed on these fact sheets. So these are the resources that I wanted to go over for the chemical contaminants rule. Again, I would recommend operators to check with your state agency for state-specific requirements, as well as be aware of your monitoring and reporting requirements, since, again, those were the majority of the violations, and make sure you do sample your, collect samples and report according to your state. The next rule I'll be going over is the stage 1 and 2, disinfection and disinfectant and disinfection byproducts rule, or DBPR. These are drinking water regulations which have been introduced to improve public health protection by lowering the public's exposure to disinfection byproducts, also known as DBPs, and high levels of disinfectant residuals, while maintaining microbial pathogen control within the distribution system. The Stage 1 DBPR, which was implemented in 2002, was intended for community water systems, transient and non-transient community water systems, which adds disinfectant as part of the treatment process. The rule established maximum residual disinfectant level goals and maximal residual disinfectant levels for chlorine, chloramines, and chlorine dioxide, which are common disinfectants, and maximum contaminant level and goals for DBPs, specifically total trihalomethanes, haloacetic acid, chlorite, and bromate. Water systems were required to develop a monitoring plan for disinfectants and DBPs and monitor their water by collecting samples and having them analyzed and reporting drinking water quality reports or results to their state. Systems using surface water sources had additional requirement where they had to meet TOC or natural organic matter removal requirements. The Stage 2 DBPR, which was introduced in 2006, complements the Stage 1 DBPR and focuses on strengthening public health by tightening compliance monitoring for specifically total trihalomethane and haloacetic acids. This rule has now included consecutive systems as part of the regulated under stage 1 and 2 DBPR. The document you see on the right is EPA's stage 1 and 2 DBPR quick reference guide. It provides an overview of the requirements from each rule, routine monitoring requirements, and how to determine if a system is in compliance. So additionally, since the stage 2 DBPR was implemented, water systems had been required to complete follow these additional requirements. One is to complete an initial distribution system evaluation, which is a year-long distribution monitoring to determine new monitoring sites which comply with the new IDSC requirements, which state that there are new requirements for determining sites that most represent locations where there would be the most total trihalomethane and haloacetic acid concentrations. Public water systems are required to complete the evaluation or a year-long evaluation and submit a report to the state. Once the systems complete an IDSE, they are required to develop a compliance monitoring plan, which includes details on how the water system plans on complying with the stage 2 DBPR monitoring requirements. The plan includes monitoring locations that were decided from the IDSE, sampling schedules, which indicates dates which operators will collect samples, along with a sketch of the distribution system so states can have a better understanding of what the distribution system looks like. Once samples have been collected and analyzed, systems collecting samples on a quarterly basis must use the data to calculate the operational evaluation levels for TTHM and HA5. The OEL provides a system with an early warning for increased levels of DBPs by evaluating the past 3 quarters data. So the OEL is calculated using the same way a local running annual average is calculated, but it uses the current quarter's data twice, along with 2 previous quarters data. This method predicts the next quarter's results to be the same as the current quarter and prepares systems so that if there is an OEL exceedance now and next month results ended up being higher than the current quarters, the system will be closer to an MCL violation and the evaluation that they did because of the exceedance would not have been in waste. So if the calculated OEL exceeds HA5 or haloacetic acid or total trihalomethane TTHM MCL, there is an exceedance. The systems will be required to notify the state within a certain number of days and conduct an operational evaluation to determine the cause of the exceedance and submit a report to the state within 90 days of the exceedance, and they will be required to fix those issues. Now, data from the analysis from the 2019 violation data show that there were close to 5,000 monitoring and reporting violations from 2019, with the majority resulting in violations from failing to monitor and report DBPs. So the rest of the violations were either failing to submit an IDSC or failing to complete routine monitoring required by the IDC. So this is the year routine monitoring to determine new sites. So specifically, a monitoring and reporting violation occurs if a system fails to collect routine samples for DBPs, disinfectants, residuals, or TOC, or fails to report an OEL exceedance or submit an OEL report to the state, along with IDSE or failing to report an IDSE. And within a year, the systems are required to report, issue a tier 3 public notification to their public within a year that if any of these issues happened, or include a violation information in their consumer confidence report. US EPA has a list of public notification templates based on different tiers, which can be used by water systems. So this link is on the US EPA's website. It'll give you a bunch of templates for tier 1, 2, and 3 for non-transient, non-community water systems and community systems. And it'll just be a list of these templates, which aren't just specific to DBPR. There could be RTCR templates as well as templates for other regulations where you can find and customize find information on exactly what wording has to be there, the language requirements, so systems can develop their own public notification requirements. So before water systems can begin compliance monitoring, systems are required to complete an initial distribution system evaluation. I included this slide because, again, I was surprised to see there are actual violations regarding the IDSC. So systems are might still be required to know these IDSC requirements. Here are 2 guidance manuals developed by EPA, which details the procedure to select how to select new monitoring sites for total trihalomethane and haloacetic acids, guidance on conducting standard monitoring or the routine monitoring required under the IDSC, and how to develop a report which they have to submit to state. Water systems should check with their state for any additional requirements for completing IDSC. The first manual applies to most system sizes, while the second manual is for smaller systems. Generally, most states will require an updated IDSC or compliance monitoring plan, depend if there is a modification done to distribution systems, or if they change any of the treatment systems, or if they implement new sources. So once a system completes an IDSE, they're required to develop a compliance monitoring plan, which will specify monitoring location and the monitoring schedule. US EPA has a 11-page monitoring template along with instructions which can be used to develop a compliance monitoring plan. However, it is recommended that water systems check with their state agency to see if they have their own template, which might differ slightly from EPA or other states. Some states might not require systems to include a diagram of their distribution system. Some systems might have additional requirements for having additional monitoring sites and that information. So it's definitely recommended that water system check with your state to see if they have their state-specific templates that they can use. And once systems have an established plan, they should submit that to their state for review and approval. If a system makes any modifications to their systems, they will be most likely required to update their compliance monitoring plan and submit it to their state for approval before they can begin compliance monitoring. So once a compliance plan is approved, water systems can actually begin compliance monitoring. So to help, since there are a lot of violations based on failing to collect samples or and report it to the state, here are some resources to help systems make sure they know the requirements. The first one is from North Carolina DEQ. It's a handy 1-page fact sheet which includes a table which details all the monitoring requirements for systems based on populations served and source water type. So this chart lists monitoring requirements for routine, reduced, and increased monitoring if that applies to your system, and provides the criteria on how systems can go to reduce monitoring or increase monitoring as well. The link on the slide will take you to DEQ's DBP webpage, where there you can find this chart along with other versions which apply to surface systems or subpart H systems. I also wanted to mention EPA's sample collector's handbook, which is an extensive guidance manual which provides information on the sampling and monitoring requirements of various drinking water contaminants and drinking water regulations. These are individual chapters there are individual chapters on each drinking water regulation, and provides information on, again, monitoring requirements for contaminants regulated under the regulation, proper procedures to collect samples, along with compliance requirements. On the slide, I have a screenshot of the chapter 10, which focuses on stage 2 DBPR, but each chapter ranges anywhere from 10 to 21 pages and provides a very good outline of each regulation. Some of these are Illinois specific, but a majority of the information found on here includes the federal regulations. There are various state agencies that have very good DBPR resources, which, again, I couldn't cover today. So I do recommend you check with your state agency to see if they have any resources of their own. And if you're having a monitoring reporting violation issues, to make sure you know your compliance monitoring plan, make sure that's up to date, make sure you know where and when to take samples, and make sure to keep a record of those results and report to your system or to your state and to your customers accordingly. The next regulation I will discuss is the lead and copper rule, also known as the LCR. This regulation, which was implemented in 1991, has gone through various minor revisions over the past few decades. The regulation is designed to protect public health by controlling and minimizing the concentration of lead and copper levels in drinking water, and by implementing reducing water corrosivity to achieve this. Lead and copper primarily enters the drinking water supply through corrosion of lead and copper containing plumbing material. So water systems that experience lead and copper in their water are required to implement corrosion control treatment. The LCR also includes public education requirements, which are implemented to ensure the public are aware of the risks of lead, especially if customers have lead service line, and the benefits of lead service line replacements. The document which you see on the right on the slide is a 2-page fact sheet meant to be used to educate the public on the lead and copper rule. There are a variety of public education documents from EPA, which I'll also discuss later in the next few slides. But there is it's very important to let the customers know the risks of consuming lead, and if they have lead service line, the risks of having red service lines. So under the LCR, public water systems are required to collect water samples from taps that are at high risk of lead and copper contamination once every 6 months. The number of samples required will depend on the system size, and water systems are required to provide a lead consumer notice, which include individual lead tap results to the people who receive water from the taps, which was used to take samples from. When more than 10% of the samples collected exceeds the action level for lead or copper, and action level exceedance occurs. Water systems will then be required to implement water quality parameter monitoring. This monitoring is used to determine to analyze the water and determine the corrosivity of the original water to help determine what type of corrosion control treatment the water system should best install, and how the treatment should be operated. Water quality samples are usually taken at the tap throughout the distribution system, as well as entry points to the distribution system, which serve as source water monitoring. Source water monitoring results can tell water systems how much source water contributes to the lead and copper concentration, and whether source water treatment is necessary. Because as I mentioned below, lead and copper generally come from plumbing material, but there are cases where lead and copper can be found within the groundwater source. So if an action level for lead specifically is exceeded, water systems are required to educate the public or the consumers about the health effects of lead and steps to minimize exposure, which could include, again, lead service line replacement. Community water systems are also required to provide an educational statement about lead in their annual consumer confidence report. Here is the data from the 2019 monitoring reporting violation, which shows that there are about 4,000 violations attributed to LCR. A majority of these violations were from failing to collect or report follow-up or routine samples, or provide lead consumer notices. The EPA has a LCR monitoring reporting guidance manual, which is a 124-page manual, which provides information on the monitoring and reporting requirements under the LCR. This manual will definitely help operators understand how many samples are required to be collected, where these samples should be collected, or the best places to collect these samples from, the steps to take when a lead or copper action level is exceeded, as well as public education and notification requirements. Various states have additional resources to help water systems comply with LCR. Michigan's EGLE has several videos which help systems develop a sampling plan, how to properly collect samples, as well as a sampling checklist to help operators avoid missing deadlines and various reporting templates to support with LCR compliance for public notification. The webpage also includes past training presentations or PowerPoint presentations, which go into detail on each component of the LCR, and it will guide you through the requirements as well as how to maintain compliance. And you can access those pages by clicking on the URL at the very top. Another web page that caught my attention was Utah DQ's Lead and Copper Rule webpage. This webpage uses visual steps to guide operators through the compliance steps and includes supporting documents such as sample setting plans, a 90th percentile calculator, and a guidance for homeowners to collect samples. So if you look at the screenshot, you see step 1 is, have your sample site plan. Step 2 is begin sampling. Step 3, what to do with your results. Step 4, which is notification requirements. And step 5, which is their certification and notice. As I mentioned earlier, they have a 90th percentile calculator. This is how the LCR determines exceedance. So it focuses on the top 10% of the highest samples collected, and they use that information or that samples to determine exceedance. So having a calculator like this will definitely help you maintain data, as well as instantly pop out whether a exceedance was occurred or not. And again, public note education is a significant component of the LCR. Here are several public education guidance resources from EPA. EPA has several guidance manuals as well as fact sheet, depending on what your public system, what type of public system you are. And they help water systems understand the public education requirements, as well as what's included in consumer confidence report when a system has an actionable exceedance, instructions to develop and deliver public education material, a checklist for implementing an effective public education program, and sample templates for water bills, brochures, posters, or any document or letters, pretty much any document that can be used to provide to your public. These are the resources for the LCR, and this will finish the monitoring, report, and compliance resources for the drinking water regulations. Unfortunately, if I had more time, I'll go over the other rules, but just to finish off, I'll briefly go over the Consumer Confidence Report rule and Public Notification Report rule, and then we can move on to showing you how to search for these documents on wateropera.org. So under the Safe Drinking Water Act, water systems are required to produce and deliver consumer confidence reports to its customers. CCRs are annual drinking water compliance reports, which include information on the drinking water source, risk of contamination if their drinking water source has that risk, contaminants which were detected in the water supply along with their levels, potential health effects from consuming these contaminants, as well as compliance information such as violations, information on how water systems resolve those violations, and any additional information to educate customers about their water quality concerns. EPA has a quick reference guide, which will provide more details on the list of requirements, as well as what should be in your consumer confidence report and how to effectively structure your consumer confidence report. EPA also has a 16-page best practice fact sheet, which serves as a guide to help water systems develop an effective CCR. The guide covers the requirements of a CCR, steps to write an effective CCR, and tips for launching a CCR electronic delivery program. So systems can make sure that they are aware of the need to send out a consumer confidence report and how to effectively create one in a timely manner. Another useful resource is Michigan Eagle's CCR guidance webinar. This is a 26-minute webinar which provides an overview of the CCR requirements as well as tips on writing an effective report. Michigan Eagle also has a CCR checklist on their CCR webpage, which guides you through each checklist will guide you through these are the required information that should be on your CCR. And finally, public notification rule is another part of the Safe Drinking Water Act, where water systems are required to notify their customers anytime a drinking water violation occurs, or when there is a threat to public health. So there's 3 tiers of violations, where each tier represents the severity of the violation, and has individual time requirements for notifying the public. There are 10 elements which are required in a public notice, along with standard language requirements. So they're like specific language wording structures, or several specific words that you have to use within your public notice. EPA's quick reference guide on public notification rule will include those information on those 10 key elements, as well as the language requirements, so that systems are aware of what to include in their public notice, as well as if there is a violation, which tier public notice is required. Public water systems are also required to provide a copy of the completed public notice to their primacy agency to ensure the notification was completed. And usually public notification forms will have a certification part where they'll sign it and send it to their state. EPA also has a public notification handbook, which is a 180-page manual, which provides instructions on developing a public notification template, as well as a variety of templates for tier 1, 2, and 3 violations, which can be used by water systems. So now that we've gone through these resources, we can switch gears, and I can show you waterarb.org website, how to use the website, as well as how to find the resources that we've talked about today. So let me switch over to our webpage. So waterarb.org is our URL. Once you go to that page, this is the front page that you'll be sent to. At the very top, you'll have a menu bar, which will take you to our events calendar located here, resource library, which includes our document database, as well as our additional resources, and newsletter at the top. You can also find the icons in the middle, search the calendar, browse the resource, read the blog, which will directly take you to those pages. So let's first look at the resource document database. So under resource library, if you go search for documents, this will take you to our resource documents library. At the very top, you'll see this dropdown, which would have 4 filter options. One is category, one is type, one is state, and one is host. The category includes what kind of categories of information that you're looking for. So one like arsenic, asset management. Are you looking for backflow related documents? Are you looking for public notification, monitoring, lead and copper? We have a variety of these categories that you can search through. Another filter is type. For documents, this will be, are you looking for some program CDs, fact sheets? Are you looking for a presentation? Are you looking for more of a guidance, lengthy guidance manual, or are you looking for videos? State will be state-specific documents. So if we have any resources that are applicable to individual state, you can search for documents using the state filter. And finally, host will be the host that the organization that developed the document. So I'll walk you through an example of how to search for some of the documents. So let's say you're looking for you want to look for documents related to compliance for monitoring. You can go to category, select on monitoring, which is one of the filter. Then you can retrieve documents. So just for monitoring, we have over 2,000 documents, and that's way too many documents to search through, and it's too overwhelming. So once we search that, you'll see another drop-down pop up at the very top. These will now have the 3 other filters that you can use to additionally filter the search results. You can also filter using keywords as well. So let's say we want to look for compliance related resource. You can type compliance, retrieve documents, and now that that shrunk our search result down to 294, which is significant. But that's still a little bit too much. So let's say you're looking for forms or templates which would help you with compliance or monitoring compliance. You can now select type, document type, and include forms and template, and now retrieve document. And now that shrunk our size to 28 search results And at the very top, the first result, for example, you'll see sample site plan approval checklist for public water system serving 1,000 people or less. So that's the title of the document, and which is also followed by a summary of it. So for this example, it's a one-page template, which can be used to create a sample siting plan in compliance with the revised total coliform rule for small public water systems. Once you click on, if that's the document that you're looking for, if you're looking for RTCR related, you go ahead and click on the document title, which will open up a new window, which would open the document from the host website. So if you look at the URL, this is from main.gov, and if you go back to the search results on waterauthor.org, you'll see the source link, which is a link to the where the URL where the document is located, the source page, as well as the host organization's name, which if you click on it will take you to the host organization's main page. Let's do another search. You can reset your search result by clicking on the reset all. Let's say you're looking for videos. If you go to document type, if you go to the bottom, you'll see videos. Then you can, let's say you're looking for videos on lead and copper. You can use the keyword search lead and copper rule and search documents, which will bring you 14 documents. But if you wanted monitoring, if you want to search for documents that are specific to monitoring, you can go to category, select monitoring, which is another category, to filter your search even more. And now you're down to 8 search results. And if you start looking through it, you can try to find, are you looking for sampling plan or brief review of sampling plan? Are you looking for videos on how to develop your sampling plan, how to collect samples, etc., which you can search through in our library database. And let's do one more. So let's say, since I've mentioned a lot of US EPA related documents, let's say you want to search for resources from EPA. You can go to host, scroll down, search for US EPA, and retrieve documents. And just from US EPA, we have over 17,000 documents, or I'm sorry, 1,700 documents. Let's say you wanted to look for the, at the very end, I mentioned the public notification manual. Let's search for that manual. We can go to category, choose public notification, which is one of the filter, retrieve documents, and that brings us down to 60 search results. But let's say you want a manual specifically, you can go to type, search for manuals, retrieve documents, and now that refined our search down to 8 results. And if we go down, you'll find the handbook right here, which when you click on it will bring you to EPA's page. So that's how you use our document library. And since I mentioned events calendar before, I'll show you how to use that as well. Once you go to our events calendar, you'll see our calendar view. Then you'll see those drop-down menus. It uses pretty much similar filters as the document library. It has event category, which shares the same categories. Are you looking for events on lead and copper, monitoring, etc.? Then the type would be a little bit different. Type would include, are you looking for certification exam, conferences, regular training, or during this time, there's a lot of organizations doing webinars, so you can search for webinars or live online courses. And then the state would be the state where the event takes place, or where if the state offers credits, what states the credits apply for. And the sponsor would be the host, the organization that is hosting the training. So, for example, let's say you're looking for events on monitoring or anything related to monitoring. Right now, once you click on it, you'll see the calendar will start to populate. You'll see some of them that has the acronym of the organization. Some of them will have the acronym followed by the actual title of the events. So for example, we're looking for monitoring related events. Since July is almost over, let's go to August. So here are some events that are related to monitoring. If we scroll through, you might see some events that may be interesting. Let's say you're interested in this one, Understanding Sanitary Survey Elements, hosted by MRWA. So if this is something that interests you, you can go ahead and click on the event, which will bring up a new window, which will populate all the information. So this is a live online course. So it's an online course that has a specific start time as well as a start date. It'll have the URL to access the event page, which will take you to the host events, sponsor website, where you can go ahead and register. Then there's details, which would include what the event is about. So this is the 1 hour virtual session and provides the understanding of the elements of the upcoming sanitary survey. Then it'll follow by contact information. If you have any questions for the instructor or the host, as well as a URL to the host website, includes the fee, so how much it costs, then how many continuing education credits offered. So if you're interested in the event, you can go ahead and click on the link to the event and go ahead and register. You also have an option, since this calendar year can be sometimes cluttered, you also have an option to view the list, which should populate every single event that applies to that criteria from today's date to as far as the records we have, which currently we have up to 2021 of June. So this is an easy way to search for training events that you're looking for. If you need training credits by a certain date and you want to learn about certain topics, you can definitely use our calendar to search for events related to it. I also do want to highlight our newsletter, which we have 3 separate newsletters. We have our wateroperator.org newsletter, which is our bi-weekly newsletter, which we focus on current events. We highlight some of the upcoming events as well as some of the resources in our library. And it's a very, we have a very great employee that works on developing these newsletters to provide you the most recent current events as well as any helpful resources that could be helpful for you. We also have a technology newsletter, which I developed, where I highlight some new technologies for smaller systems to comply with drinking water and wastewater regulations, as well as upcoming events related to innovative technologies and recent publications. Then we also have a tribal utility newsletter, which focuses on, again, drinking water and wastewater compliance or related documents for tribal systems. You can find our archives of our newsletters on this page, and you can also register at the very top of the page entering your email address. So since we're getting close to the end time, I'll go back to our presentation and I'll move on to questions if we have any. So let me pull up the questions. Okay, so looks like we have one question so far. Will this presentation be shared with attendees? Yes, once we finish the webinar, again, these are recorded. And if you go to our wateroperator.org website and go to our events calendar, at the very top, you'll find recordings of all the past webinars that we've done so far for this year. And for July 21st, free compliance and monitoring, right now you see register, but that should be replaced with a link to our recording. Looks like that's the only question we have for now. So again, if you have any questions, additional questions, you can always feel to contact me, which you'll see the email just at the top, Terashi1@illinois.edu, or Steve Wilson, which is my supervisor. He knows a lot of people within the state agencies, as well as a bunch of people in EPA, and he knows a lot of people that he can connect you to for if you have any compliance issues. And again, if you have any questions, you can email us at info@wateroperator.org, which you can also additionally find on our main page. If you scroll to the bottom, you'll find our contact information. So again, if you want your certificate for attending the webinar, or if you have additional questions, feel free to contact me or through info@wateroperator.org. And with that, thank you everyone for your time. And again, if you have any additional questions, feel free to contact us whenever. Thank you very much.